All right, welcome to the fire weather briefing for July 12th. Got myself, Jeremy, over in Spokane and Matthew over in Seattle. So let's take a look at the fire weather concerns over the next 7 days. I'll start with eastern Washington and North Idaho. We are looking at some elevated conditions for the next 3 days, except for critical conditions over parts of central Washington on Sunday, where we have a fire weather watch in effect for hot, dry, and windy conditions. The winds will shift around out of the north on Monday and then out of the north to northeast on Tuesday. And then we'll have some quieter conditions for a few days before we see warm, dry, breezy conditions return for the end of the week. And over North Idaho, similar conditions, although not quite to the levels for the winds to bring things up to elevated. So we have low fire weather concerns this week over North Idaho. Now I'll pass it over to Seattle to talk about Western Washington.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so a couple days we're highlighting this week. Sunday will be the first of those, and that will be a return of some of the warmer and drier conditions. Today will still be warm and dry, but we should see those RHs tomorrow afternoon get closer to where we saw them yesterday, and that is down into about the 20 to 30% range for most of the spots, slightly higher as you get out towards the coast, of course, as there is still some onshore flow. The break in the pattern Monday is a good break for us. We get a good push and good recoveries, but that will only be temporary before we get later in the week, where we have the return of high pressure overhead, a potential thermal trough building north over the area, and that will give us the warmer and drier conditions Tuesday and Wednesday. Fortunately, we're not seeing a strong push of the northeast or east wind. It's more of a northerly variety for most of our areas, especially when the winds are a little bit stronger during each of those days. But nevertheless, RHs will get quite low, and that is the reason for those elevated concerns both Tuesday and Wednesday. As we get to Thursday, we have the addition of perhaps some extra instability. We see a deeper mix layer, the mixing heights up a little bit higher, and maybe another factor to contend with in addition to those warm and dry conditions. So we'll be looking out for that as the week goes on, but several days of elevated is the main story across the west side.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to a closer look at the expected conditions on Sunday. This is the day where we have that fire weather watch for those areas in red. For the east slopes of the Cascade, for this zone, it's mainly for the eastern part of that zone where we have the largest concerns. And then we have elevated conditions over a lot of those surrounding areas due to the dry and breezy conditions. Low relative humidity for the eastern portion of central Washington Cascade Mountains with higher RHs closer to the crest. So yeah, that's what we were talking about just a little bit ago. It will be very warm with high temperatures getting up into the 90s to low 100s, with humidity getting down to 15 to 25%. Going into Monday, so Monday, the winds are going to be shifting around late in the afternoon and evening out of the north, and they'll be out of the northwest across out of the west to northwest over much of the region, with sustained winds 10 to 20, gusting to 30, min RHs 20 to 28%. I do want to note, though, for the Okanagan Valley, it could be a pretty substantial wind that comes down the valley Monday evening. Right now, we're looking at gusts up to 50 miles per hour. That could be a situation that even with the RHs recovering, that the strength of the winds could lead to a critical situation. So that'll be one zone we'll be taking a closer look at. And sometimes this pattern can also cause problems for northeast Washington with a push of those north winds. So we will be taking a closer look at that today. All right. And speaking of Monday, there is some uncertainty with the winds, and it has to do with how strong and how far west this system comes in, clusters 1 and 2 tend to be a weaker scenario where the winds wouldn't be as strong. Clusters 3 and 4 show a sharper system dropping in. And right now, the latest models are trending towards that stronger solution. So again, we'll be keeping a close eye on that. And then lastly, the satellite image is showing just the flat high pressure, but with the westerly flow over the area, that's what's going to help enhance those westerly winds across central Washington for the next few days. All right, so moving on to the dashboard items. Here's a look at the current hazards. There's that fire weather watch that's in effect. And then there's also a heat advisory that is encompassing much of eastern Washington that runs through Monday. And moving on to the expected weather. So here is the high temperatures for today. Over on the east side, getting up into the 90s across the lower elevations. Minimum relative humidities getting down again into that 15 to 25% range. And then here's those winds. We're looking at gusts not strong enough where we have any critical conditions today, but we will have some elevated conditions across central Washington, especially. Moving on into day 2, as we go into Sunday, this is going to be our hottest day east of the Cascades with high temperatures in the 90s to low 100s. Here is the minimum relative humidities getting down into about the 15 to 25% range. And then over on the west side, Matthew, I believe you had something you wanted to talk about on this slide.
Yes, I just wanted to indicate here that while the range shown on this graphic for the west side really only bottoms out around 35% around Mount Rainier, there is some uncertainty, and in fact, there is a decent chance, even a 30 to 40% chance of seeing those min-RHs get closer to those values that give us some concern in the afternoon. So that would be talking in the 20 to 30% range, especially south of Puget Sound and in the Cascades south of Interstate 90. That would more closely match those values that we saw in the observations yesterday afternoon, and we expect that Sunday may actually trend closer to those values. So we'll be taking a close look at that in the forecast today, and you can expect that shift to occur with the update later today.
All right, thank you. And then for the winds for Sunday, you can see there's those increased gusts where we have that fire weather watch out with those breezy conditions out of the northwest. And then moving on to day 3, temperatures are still going to be warm up into the 90s, minimum relative humidities, again, fairly low. And then here's the forecast winds. On Monday, you can see how they're shifting around. And again, there are some model solutions that show gusts getting up to around 50 down the Okanagan Valley. So we'll be, again, taking a closer look at that today. And then also with that system coming down on Monday, there is the potential for some thunderstorms over the far northeast corner of Washington into the Idaho Panhandle. And with any thunderstorms, they are expected to be wet. So there is also the potential for some wetting rain out of that. And then moving on to day 4, the main thing I wanted to show as we go into Tuesday is the chance of thunderstorms continuing over northeast Washington into the Idaho Panhandle. And again, the potential that there could be some wetting rains associated with those. Then moving on to day 5, as we get into Wednesday, you can see those humidities dropping down, especially on the west side in Seattle. Did you want to add some info to that?
Yeah, just really indicate that we have seen some variation in the guidance over the last couple of days in terms of which day may be the warmest and driest. But this is the range of what we're looking at for whatever day that shapes up to be. Right now, it looks like it most likely will be Wednesday. And again, the combination of both these low RHs as well as the wind, which we'll get to in just a second, are the reason that we are targeting that as another day to look out for. And with the wind here on the west side in particular, I want to call attention to those gusts. Seeing a fairly even swath of winds. It's not terribly strong, but it's on the order of a 10 to 15 mile per hour gust throughout that time period. And the direction at this point looks to be more of a northerly. We're not going to be a true east or northeast at this point, most likely. So that is the good news. But if we are getting that dry, those dry conditions across the interior, coupled with some of those breezes picking up in the afternoon, that is the other thing that we're looking out for. Despite it being day 5, this is actually a pretty strong signal for us 5 days out in the guidance. So we wanted to highlight that as something to look out for as we get into the middle part of next week.
All right, sounds good. Looking at the precipitation, whoops, I'm not sure what happened there. Let me try to toggle this back on. There we go. So over the next 7 days, and most of this is going to fall late Monday into Tuesday as that system drops down. There is the potential for some wetting rains over fire weather zone 700 and also over parts of 101. But given that this is going to be some convective precipitation, we're not expecting these amounts to be widespread. This may be more on a localized basis, which is why when I was showing those chance of wetting rains, they were generally around 20 to 30%. All right, moving on to the trends. I'll let you talk about the west side, Seattle.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll start with Hosemine today up in the North Cascades. And really, nothing here is too different than what we've been talking about as we look at the temperatures being quite warm today and peaking for this first round on Sunday. With the RHs dipping down into those values that give us some elevated concerns around 30%. And we see similar up and down the Cascades on our side. Fortunately, there's not a whole lot of wind with this. We'll see some of our diurnally driven breezes, but the directions are not too problematic. And we still have some degree of onshore, which should give certainly our lower elevations decent to good, if not excellent recoveries. And you see here at Hosemine as well, it does indicate fairly excellent recoveries each night. So that's good. And as we get back into the later part of the week, that's where our attention begins to shift. We see those RHs dipping down Wednesday and Thursday down closer to that 20% threshold, coupled with a little bit of an east-northeast wind in the Cascades. So that, again, is what we're really looking out for as we see those warmest, driest, and perhaps breeziest, but I'll again indicate breeziest here for us on the west side is relative in the sense that we're not seeing a strong signal for wind. Just kind of the diurnal breezes that develop each afternoon will be the main area of concern as they overlay with those lowest relative humidity values.
All right, sounds good. And over on the east side, we'll take a look at Oroville here and wanted to highlight again the Monday time frame. Right now, the winds that we have in the forecast aren't real strong, but we could see a much stronger push of north winds down the valley there on Monday. And with that, it's also going to bring a trend towards cooler temperatures and higher humidities as we head into Tuesday. And then we start to trend those temperatures back up for the middle to end of the week, as well as the humidity is dropping back down. And then over North Idaho, we'll just look at Bonner's Ferry, and you can see a more significant increase in relative humidity for that Monday, Tuesday time frame, with that system dropping in, and also pretty substantial cooling, high temperatures cooling from the low 90s to the low 70s, so about a 20-degree drop. And then temperatures gradually rebounding as we head later on into the week. The 8 to 14-day outlook is showing increased odds of above normal temperatures and about normal precipitation. So that concludes the fire weather briefing. I will stop the recording.